My family sent me a fruit basket for Christmas and a bill for their ski trip paid with my card. I didn't call. I called the bank instead. When they returned, the house was gone, and so was I. But let me tell you how it really started, because that moment was just the end of a very long, very painful story. I'm Diana. I'm 55 years old, and until that Christmas morning, I thought I was living a good life. I'd been a high school English teacher for 32 years before I retired early to help my family. My husband passed away 6 years ago from a heart attack, and since then, I'd become what my 3 adult children like to call their safety net. What I didn't realize was that I'd actually become their personal ATM. That Christmas morning started like any other in recent years. I woke up alone in the house that had once been filled with laughter and chaos when my kids were young. The silence felt heavier than usual, probably because I'd been expecting them to call, to stop by, to remember that I existed. Before we continue, comment where you're watching from and subscribe to the channel. We'd love to see how far our stories are reaching. But by noon, nothing. No calls, no texts, no visits. Then the doorbell rang. I rushed to answer it, thinking maybe one of them had decided to surprise me. Instead, I found a delivery man holding a small wicker basket wrapped in cellophane, the kind you see marked down in grocery stores after the holidays. "Diana Morrison?" he asked. "That's me. Merry Christmas, ma'am." I took the basket inside and found a card tucked between a few bruised apples and some packets of instant hot chocolate. The handwriting was Sarah's, my eldest daughter, but the message was brief. "Merry Christmas, Mom. Hope you have a peaceful day. Love the kids. Peaceful." That word hit me harder than it should have. Not wonderful or joyful or blessed. Peaceful. Like they were hoping I'd just sit quietly and not bother anyone. I tried calling Sarah first. Straight to voicemail. Then Michael, my middle child. Voicemail. Finally, Jessica, my youngest. Voicemail. I sat on my couch, holding that cheap fruit basket, feeling something crack inside my chest. This wasn't how Christmas used to be. When Robert was alive, when the kids were younger, our house was the gathering place. I'd spend weeks preparing, cooking, decorating. Everyone would come home. We'd laugh until our stomachs hurt, argue about silly things, and fall asleep watching old movies together. But gradually, things had changed. First, it was, "Mom, we're going to do Christmas at Michael's this year since he has the bigger house." Then it became, "We're spending Christmas with in-laws this year, but we'll see you soon." And finally, this year, complete silence until a fruit basket showed up at my door. I decided to check my phone, maybe see what they were up to on social media. Sometimes the kids posted pictures, and I could at least feel connected to their lives from a distance. That's when I saw it. Jessica had posted a photo on Instagram 3 hours earlier. The whole family, all 3 of my children, their spouses, my 6 grandchildren, standing in front of a massive stone fireplace in what looked like a luxury ski lodge. Everyone was wearing matching pajamas, the kind that cost $60 each. The Christmas tree behind them was enormous, probably 12 feet tall, decorated with what looked like professional ornaments. The caption read, "Best Christmas ever with the family that matters most. So grateful for this amazing trip to Aspen. Nothing beats quality time with the people who really love you." I stared at that photo for a long time. The family that matters most. The people who really love you. I wasn't in the picture. I wasn't even mentioned. My hands started shaking as I scrolled through more photos. There was Michael teaching my grandson how to ski, Sarah's family building snowmen, everyone laughing, everyone together, everyone having the kind of Christmas I'd dreamed of having with them. They'd planned this trip. They'd coordinated outfits. They'd arranged for professional photography. And they'd done it all without telling me. I felt something rising in my throat. Not quite tears, not quite anger, just a hollow, aching recognition that I'd been deliberately left out of my own family. Then my phone buzzed. A text from my bank. "Alert. Large transaction on your credit card ending in 4721. 18,347.82 euros charged to Mountain View Resort Aspen, CO. If this transaction was not authorized by you, please contact us immediately." The fruit basket slipped from my lap and hit the floor. Apples rolled across my hardwood floors, but I couldn't move. I just sat there, staring at that text message, feeling my entire world shift. They hadn't just excluded me from Christmas. They'd charged their luxury family vacation to my credit card. $18,000, without asking, without telling me, while sending me a $20 fruit basket from the grocery store. I read the text again, hoping I'd misunderstood, but there it was, clear as day. My card, their vacation, my money, their best Christmas ever. The worst part wasn't even the money, though $18,000 was more than I spent on myself in an entire year. The worst part was the calculation behind it. They'd planned this exclusion. They'd discussed it, coordinated it, executed it with precision. This wasn't an oversight or a miscommunication. This was deliberate. I sat there until the sun started setting, just thinking, remembering, trying to figure out when I'd become someone they could treat this way. When Robert died, I'd thrown myself into helping my children navigate their grief and their busy lives. Sarah was going through a difficult divorce and needed help with childcare. Michael was starting his own business and struggling financially. Jessica was in graduate school and drowning in student loans. I'd stepped in wherever they needed me, paid for whatever they couldn't afford, watched grandchildren whenever they asked. I thought I was being a good mother. I thought I was showing them love. But sitting there on Christmas evening, surrounded by the evidence of their betrayal, I realized something that made my stomach turn. They'd stopped seeing me as their mother a long time ago. I was just a resource to them. A solution to their problems, a bank account with a heartbeat. The phone rang around 9 o'clock. Sarah. I let it go to voicemail. 20 minutes later, she called again. Then Michael, then Jessica. I didn't answer any of them. Instead, I did something I'd never done before. I called the bank's fraud hotline. "This is Diana Morrison," I said when someone answered. "I need to report unauthorized charges on my credit card." The representative was kind and efficient. She walked me through the process, explaining that I could dispute the charges, cancel the card, and file a report. As she spoke, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Power, control, the ability to say no. After I hung up, I sat in the quiet of my house, surrounded by Christmas decorations I'd put up for no one but myself, and I made a decision that would change everything. I was done being their safety net. I was done being taken for granted. I was done sacrificing my dignity for their convenience. But I wasn't going to confront them, argue with them, or try to make them understand what they'd done wrong. I was 55 years old, and I was tired of begging people to love me properly. Instead, I was going to show them exactly what it cost to lose me. And that fruit basket? It was still sitting on my kitchen counter the next morning, a perfect symbol of how little I meant to the people I'd given everything to. But it would be the last gift of its kind I'd ever accept from them. The voicemails started piling up the day after Christmas. 12 missed calls by noon, but I didn't listen to a single one. I had more important things to do than hear whatever excuses they'd prepared. I spent that morning at my kitchen table with a cup of coffee and my laptop, doing something I should have done years ago. Looking at my bank statements, really looking at them. Not just glancing at the balance and moving on, but tracing every transaction, every charge, every automatic payment I'd set up to make their lives easier. What I found made me physically sick. September, $2,400 for Michael's business loan payment that he'd asked me to help with temporarily. October, $850 for Jessica's car repair, plus another $600 for her apartment security deposit when she decided to move closer to her boyfriend. November, $200 for Sarah's youngest daughter's dental work because their insurance didn't cover enough. And that was just 3 months. 3 months of what I'd convinced myself was normal family support. I pulled up my records from the entire year, then the year before that, and the year before that. In the 3 years since I'd retired early to be more available for the family, I'd given them over $85,000. Not loans, gifts, money I'd handed over without question, without contracts, without even the expectation of a thank you. My retirement account, which Robert and I had carefully built over decades, had shrunk by nearly a third. The house we'd bought 30 years ago still had a mortgage because I'd taken out a second one to help Michael start his consulting business. The modest inheritance I'd received from my parents? Gone. Spent on private school tuition for grandchildren whose parents made more money than I ever had as a teacher. I pushed the laptop away and walked to my bedroom window, staring out at the snow-covered yard where my grandchildren used to play when they were younger, when they still wanted to spend time at Grandma's house. When I was still a person to them instead of just a checkbook. My neighbor Mrs. Patterson was outside getting her mail, bundled up in a coat I recognized. I'd bought her that coat 2 Christmases ago when she mentioned she couldn't afford a new one. She'd tried to pay me back in small installments, but I'd told her to forget about it. She was 83 years old and living on Social Security. She'd earned the right to be taken care of. But my own children? They were all college-educated adults with careers and homes and healthy families. And somehow, I'd become their personal retirement fund. The irony hit me like a slap. I'd retired early to help my family, which meant I was helping financially support people who were making more money than I was. I went back to my laptop and started a new search. I wanted to see what my children had been posting on social media over the past few months. Maybe I could understand when I'd stopped being their mother and started being their ATM. What I found was worse than I'd imagined. In October, Sarah had posted photos from a weekend wine tour with her husband. The caption read, "Much needed getaway. Sometimes you just have to invest in experiences over things." The comments were full of friends praising their priorities and asking where they'd stayed. That same weekend, she'd called me in tears because they couldn't afford their mortgage payment. I'd transferred $2,800 without hesitation. In November, Michael had shared pictures from his son's birthday party. They'd rented a bouncy house, hired a magician, and set up what looked like a professional candy bar. The party favors alone must have cost $200. But 2 weeks later, he'd asked me to cover his health insurance premium because things were tight this month. Jessica was the worst. Her Instagram was full of expensive brunches, shopping hauls, and weekend trips. She'd even posted a photo of herself getting a $150 facial with the caption, "Self-Care Sunday. You can't pour from an empty cup." The same week she'd posted that, she'd called me sobbing because she couldn't afford her student loan payment and was afraid of defaulting. I'd sent her $900 immediately. They weren't struggling. They were living beyond their means and using me to bridge the gap between the lifestyle they wanted and the one they could actually afford. I was about to close the laptop when I saw something that made my blood turn cold. It was a screenshot that had been posted in a private family group text that I wasn't part of. I only saw it because Michael's wife had accidentally posted it to her public story before quickly deleting it, but I'd caught it in those few minutes it was live. The screenshot showed a conversation between my 3 children from last month. Sarah had written, "Mom's being dramatic again about money. She acts like she's poor, but she's sitting on Dad's life insurance money." Michael had responded, "Right? She literally has nothing else to spend it on. No social life, no hobbies, no travel. We're basically her only entertainment." And Jessica, my baby, the one I'd thought was closest to me, had added, "She's getting clingy lately too. Calling too much, asking too many questions about our plans. It's exhausting." I stared at that screenshot until the words blurred together. Dramatic. No social life. Exhausting. This is how they talked about me when I wasn't around. This is what they really thought of their mother who'd spent 6 years putting their needs before her own. I'd been so worried about being a burden to them that I'd failed to notice they'd already decided I was one. My hands were shaking as I screenshotted the image before it disappeared completely. I needed proof that this wasn't my imagination, that I wasn't being dramatic or oversensitive, like they'd probably claim if I ever confronted them about it. The phone rang again. Sarah. I watched it go to voicemail. I watched it. 2 minutes later, another call. Michael this time. I turned off my phone. I needed time to think, to process what I'd learned. But more than that, I needed to understand how I'd let this happen. When had I stopped being a mother and become an enabler? When had I stopped teaching my children to be independent and started teaching them that I would always be there to fix their problems? The answer was uncomfortable but clear. It had started the day Robert died. I'd been so desperate to keep our family close, so afraid that grief would scatter us to the wind, that I'd made myself indispensable in the worst possible way. I'd taught them that love looked like money, that care looked like solving their problems for them, and they'd learned the lesson perfectly. They'd learned that Mom would always say yes, that Mom's money was their money, that Mom didn't have wants or needs of her own because Mom lived for them. They'd learned that they could take and take and take, and I would just be grateful they were letting me give. But sitting there in my quiet house, surrounded by the evidence of their manipulation, I realized something they didn't know about me yet. I was done being grateful for being used. Tomorrow, I would start making some changes. Not dramatic ones, not angry ones, quiet ones. The kind of changes that would teach them the difference between a mother's love and a mother's bank account. They thought they knew me. They thought they had me figured out. They were about to learn how wrong they were. The next morning, I did something I hadn't done in years. I made breakfast just for myself. 2 eggs, wheat toast, fresh orange juice squeezed from real oranges instead of the concentrate I usually bought to save money. I sat at my kitchen table and ate slowly, savoring each bite without checking my phone for messages or worrying about who might need something from me. It was peaceful. Actually peaceful, not the dismissive kind my children had wished for me on Christmas. At 9 o'clock, I drove to the bank. I need to close several accounts and remove authorized users from my credit cards, I told the customer service representative, a young woman named Amanda who reminded me of Jessica at that age. Bright, eager, full of possibilities. Amanda pulled up my accounts on her computer, and I watched her eyebrows rise slightly as she scrolled through the activity. Dozens of automatic payments, multiple authorized users, accounts that had been drained and refilled in endless cycles. "Are you sure you want to remove all authorized users?" she asked gently. "Sometimes families like to maintain access for emergencies." I thought about the $18,000 ski trip. I'm sure. It took 2 hours to undo 6 years of financial entanglement. Michael's business loan payment that automatically came from my checking account every month. The joint savings account I'd opened with Sarah for family emergencies that had somehow become her personal slush fund. Jessica's student loan payment that I'd been covering directly. With each account closed, each automatic payment canceled, I felt lighter. Like I was taking back pieces of myself that I'd given away without realizing they were gone. "Is there anything else I can help you with today?" Amanda asked as we finished the paperwork. "Yes," I said. "I'd like to set up an appointment with a financial advisor. I need to plan for my actual retirement, not just my children's convenience." When I got home, I made another call I should have made years ago. Dr. Patricia Reeves, a therapist who'd been recommended to me after Robert died. I'd been too busy being strong for the family to follow through on counseling then, but I wasn't too busy anymore. "I have an opening Thursday at 2, Dr. Reeves said after I explained that I needed help understanding how I'd lost myself in trying to take care of everyone else. "I'll take it." The phone had been ringing all morning, but I'd left it off. When I finally turned it back on at lunch, there were 17 missed calls and 9 voicemails, all from my children. I listened to the first one. Sarah's voice, tight with irritation. "Mom, call me back. Michael said you went to the bank this morning. We need to talk." The second one was Michael, attempting calm but with an edge I recognized. "Mom, whatever you're thinking about doing, let's discuss it first. Don't make any rash decisions." By the fourth voicemail, Jessica was in full panic mode. "Mom, my student loan payment bounced. My credit is going to be ruined. You have to call me back right now." I deleted them all without listening to the rest. Instead, I called someone I hadn't spoken to in months, my sister Linda, who lived in Portland. Linda and I had grown apart over the years, mainly because every conversation had become about my children's latest drama or financial crisis. She'd tried to tell me I was being taken advantage of, but I'd been too defensive to listen. "Diana," she answered, surprise clear in her voice. "Is everything okay?" "Actually," I said, settling into my favorite chair with a cup of tea, "I think it might be for the first time in years." I told her everything. The Christmas exclusion, the ski trip charges, the screenshots, the bank visit. Linda listened without interrupting, which reminded me why I'd always trusted her judgment. "I'm proud of you," she said when I finished. "I've been watching this train wreck for 6 years, wanting to shake you but not knowing how to make you see it. I feel like I'm abandoning them." "Diana, honey, they abandoned you first. They just trained you not to notice." That afternoon, I did something else I hadn't done in years. I went through my closets and dresser drawers, really looking at my clothes. Half of what I owned was worn out, faded, or ill-fitting. I'd been so focused on making sure my grandchildren had nice clothes, my children could afford their mortgages, that I'd stopped taking care of myself. I found the credit card I'd hidden away for real emergencies and drove to the mall. I bought myself 3 outfits that actually fit properly: a warm winter coat to replace the one I'd been wearing for 8 years, and a pair of boots that made me feel confident instead of invisible. When the saleswoman asked if I was shopping for a special occasion, I almost said no automatically. Then I paused. "Actually, yes," I said. "I'm shopping for the rest of my life." That evening, I sat down with a legal pad and made a list. Not a to-do list for other people, but a list for myself. Things I'd wanted to do but had put off because I was always focused on my children's immediate needs. Take a photography class, visit Linda in Portland, learn to paint watercolors, travel somewhere I'd never been, maybe get a small dog for company. Simple things, modest dreams that I'd convinced myself I didn't deserve while I was bankrolling everyone else's bigger dreams. My phone rang at 8 o'clock. "Sarah." I let it ring. It rang again immediately. I turned it off. 10 minutes later, my doorbell rang. Through the peephole, I could see Michael standing on my front porch, his expression grim. He'd driven 40 minutes from his house to mine, which told me everything I needed to know about how seriously they were taking my new boundaries. I opened the door but didn't invite him in. "Mom, what the hell is going on?" His voice was sharper than I'd ever heard him use with me. "My business loan payment bounced. Do you have any idea what that could do to my credit?" "Yes," I said calmly. "The same thing it would do to anyone else who can't afford their payments." His mouth opened, then closed. He wasn't used to this version of me. The version that answered questions directly instead of immediately offering to fix problems. "You can't just cut us off without warning," he said, his voice rising. "We have families to think about. Responsibilities." "So do I, Michael. And my first responsibility is to myself." "That's selfish, Mom. Family is supposed to help family." The word selfish hung in the air between us. It was the same word Sarah had used in her text messages. The same accusation they'd probably been making about me for months. "You're right," I said. "Family is supposed to help family. But help goes both ways. When was the last time any of you helped me with anything? He blinked, clearly struggling to come up with an answer. When was the last time any of you asked how I was doing? Really asked, not just as a preface to asking for money? His face reddened. We shouldn't have to ask. You're our mother, and you're my children. But you're also adults with jobs and homes and families of your own. You don't need a mother to pay your bills. You need a bank. Mom, come on. Don't be like this. Like what? Like someone who expects to be treated with respect instead of like an ATM? He took a step closer, his voice dropping to the tone he used to use when he was trying to manipulate me into saying yes to something. Look, I know we should have invited you to Aspen. That was wrong. But you were so sad after Dad died, and we thought you'd be more comfortable staying home. The lie was so smooth, so practiced, that I almost believed it myself. Almost. Michael, I said quietly, I saw the text messages. I know what you really think of me. His face went pale. What text messages? The ones where you call me dramatic and clingy. Where you say I have nothing else to spend money on because I have no life. The silence stretched between us like a chasm. Mom, we didn't mean, yes you did. And you know what? You were right about one thing. I didn't have a life. Because I'd given it all to you. I stepped back and put my hand on the door. But I'm taking it back now. The emergency family meeting was called for Saturday afternoon at Sarah's house. I received the summons via text from all 3 children within an hour of each other, which told me they'd coordinated their approach. This wasn't going to be a conversation. It was going to be an intervention. I almost didn't go. Part of me wanted to ignore them completely, to let them figure out their own problems while I focused on building my new life. But I realized I needed to see this through. Not for them, but for myself. I needed to look them in the eye and hear what they really thought about the mother who'd spent 6 years sacrificing for their comfort. I dressed carefully that morning, one of my new outfits, the winter coat that actually fit properly, boots that made me feel grounded and strong. I looked in the mirror and saw someone I hadn't seen in years, a woman who knew her own worth. Sarah's house was in the suburbs, a 4-bedroom colonial that I'd helped with the down payment for 3 years ago. Both my son's cars were already in the driveway when I arrived. They'd gotten there early to strategize, no doubt. Sarah answered the door with a tight smile, the kind she used with difficult parents when she was working as a school administrator. Mom, thanks for coming. We're all in the living room. The scene was carefully orchestrated. Michael and Jessica sat on the couch together, presenting a united front. Sarah took the chair across from them, leaving me the single chair that faced all 3 of them, like I was on trial. So, Sarah began, her voice artificially calm, we need to talk about what happened this week. Yes, we do, I agreed, settling into my chair. But first, I'd like to hear about your Christmas vacation. How was Aspen? The silence was immediate and uncomfortable. Michael shifted in his seat. Jessica looked at her hands. Mom, Sarah said carefully, we can explain about that. I'm listening. She exchanged glances with her siblings before continuing. We wanted to invite you, but honestly, we thought you'd be happier staying home. You've seemed so tired lately, and we know traveling stresses you out. It was such a polished lie that I almost admired the craftsmanship. They'd had 6 days to prepare this story, and this was the best they could do. And charging it to my credit card? I asked. Was that also for my benefit? Jessica finally looked up, her eyes already filling with tears. She'd always been the one who cried when she was caught in wrongdoing, and it had always worked on me before. Mom, we were going to pay you back, she said, her voice trembling. We thought you wouldn't mind since you always tell us to put family first. When exactly were you planning to pay me back $18,000? We were going to work out a payment plan, Michael said. But his voice lacked conviction. I opened my purse and pulled out a folder I'd prepared. Inside were printouts of every transaction they'd charged to my cards or requested from my accounts over the past year. I spread them out on Sarah's coffee table like evidence in a courtroom. Let's talk about payment plans, I said. According to my records, you've borrowed $85,000 from me over the past 3 years. I don't see any payments on any of it. Sarah's composure cracked slightly. Mom, those weren't loans. Those were gifts. Gifts, I repeated. Like the $18,000 vacation I wasn't invited to? That's different, Michael said quickly. We didn't mean to use your card. It was an accident. I laughed, and the sound surprised all of us. It wasn't bitter or angry. It was actually amused. Michael, I taught high school for 32 years. I've heard every lie teenagers can invent, but you're not teenagers anymore. You're adults. And this is insulting. Jessica's tears turned into sobs. Mom, you're being so mean. This isn't like you. You're right, I said. The old me would have apologized by now. The old me would have asked what I could do to fix this. The old me would have already offered to forget about the money if it meant keeping the peace. I leaned forward, meeting each of their eyes in turn. But the old me was being taken advantage of by her own children, and I'm not her anymore. We weren't taking advantage, Sarah said, but her voice was weak. We're family. Family helps each other. When was the last time any of you helped me? I asked the same question I'd asked Michael at my door. Not sent a fruit basket or a text message. Actually helped me. They looked at each other, clearly scrambling for an answer. We're here for you emotionally, Jessica said finally. Are you? When was the last time any of you called just to see how I was doing? Not to ask for money or a favor, just to talk to your mother? More silence. When was the last time any of you remembered my birthday without Facebook reminding you? Sarah's face flushed. Mom, that's not fair. When was the last time any of you invited me to dinner at your house? When was the last time you included me in your plans without me having to pay for them? You're making us sound like monsters, Michael said, his voice rising. We love you. Do you? Or do you love what I provide for you? The question hung in the air like smoke, because we all knew the answer, even if they weren't willing to say it out loud. Look, Sarah said, shifting into her problem-solving mode. I get that you're upset, and you have every right to be. We should have handled the Aspen thing differently, but canceling all the automatic payments, closing accounts, removing us from your credit cards, that's extreme. Is it? Or is it what any reasonable person would do after discovering their family had stolen from them? Stolen? Jessica gasped. We didn't steal anything. What would you call using someone's credit card without permission? We thought you wouldn't mind, she protested. You thought I wouldn't mind? Or you thought I wouldn't find out? Michael stood up, pacing to the window. This is ridiculous. We're having this whole drama over money. Money you don't even need. You have Dad's life insurance, his pension, the house is almost paid off. So because I'm financially stable, that means my money belongs to you? That's not what I said. That's exactly what you said. You think because I don't live paycheck to paycheck like you do, I don't deserve to keep my own money. Sarah tried a different approach. Mom, we're worried about you. You're isolating yourself, making rash decisions. Maybe you should talk to someone. Grief can manifest in strange ways, even years later. The suggestion that I was having some kind of breakdown almost made me laugh again. It was such a perfect manipulation tactic. Can't argue with my logic. Suggest I'm mentally unstable. I am talking to someone, I said. A therapist. And you know what she's helping me understand? That I've been enabling you for years. That I've been so afraid of losing you, that I taught you to use me. That's not true, Jessica said, but her voice was small. Isn't it? When was the last time any of you solved your own problems without calling me first? When was the last time you faced a financial challenge without immediately thinking of Mom's checkbook? They had no answer because there wasn't one. I stood up, gathering the financial documents from the coffee table. I love you, I said, and I meant it. But I'm done being your safety net. I'm done solving problems you should be solving yourselves. I'm done being grateful for the privilege of being used. Mom, wait, Sarah said, panic creeping into her voice. We can work this out. We can make changes. I already have. I walked toward the door, but Michael blocked my path. You can't just abandon your family, he said, his voice hard. We're your children. We need you. I looked at my middle child, this man I'd raised and loved and sacrificed for, and I felt something shift in my chest. Not heartbreak, not anger, just clarity. You don't need me. Michael, you need my money, and once you learn the difference, maybe we can have a real relationship. I stepped around him and walked out of that house, leaving behind 3 adults who were about to learn what it meant to be truly independent for the first time in their lives. The drive home was quiet, but not lonely. For the first time in 6 years, I felt like I was driving towards something instead of away from it. The retaliation started within 48 hours. First, it was subtle. A cousin I barely spoke to called to ask if I was feeling all right, because Sarah had mentioned I was going through a rough patch. Then my neighbor, Mrs. Chen, stopped by with a casserole and a concerned expression, saying she'd heard I was having family troubles. They were building a narrative. Poor Diana, lost without her children's guidance, making irrational decisions in her grief and loneliness. By the end of the week, it escalated. My sister Linda called, her voice tight with irritation. Diana, what the hell did you tell your kids about me? Nothing. Why? Because Jessica just called me crying, asking me to talk sense into you. She said you're having some kind of breakdown and that I'm the only family member you trust anymore. I closed my eyes, feeling a familiar exhaustion settle over me. I'm not having a breakdown, Linda. I know that. But they're calling everyone. Your kids have contacted Aunt Ruth, Cousin Mark, even Robert's brother Tom. They're telling people you've become paranoid and isolated, that you're pushing away everyone who loves you. The manipulation was impressive in its scope and coordination. They'd turned my decision to establish boundaries into evidence of mental instability, and they were using my own extended family to pressure me back into compliance. What did you tell Jessica? I told her that maybe if she'd been a better daughter, her mother wouldn't need to protect herself from her own children. Despite everything, I smiled. Linda had always been direct. She didn't like that much, Linda continued. Started crying about how ungrateful you are, how they've tried so hard to include you, but you're impossible to please. The lies were so bold, so comprehensive, that I felt a grudging admiration for their creativity. They'd rewritten history completely, casting themselves as the patient, loving children dealing with an unstable parent. My therapy appointment with Dr. Reeves couldn't come soon enough. You seem calmer, she observed as I settled into the chair across from her. How are you feeling about the boundaries you've set? Relieved, I said, surprising myself with the honesty. But also guilty. They're telling everyone I'm having a breakdown. Dr. Reeves nodded knowingly. That's a common response when someone stops enabling family dysfunction. The system fights back. The system? Your family has operated for years with you in the role of rescuer, and them in the role of victims who need rescuing. When you step out of that role, the entire system becomes unstable. They'll do whatever it takes to pull you back in. She was right. I'd seen it in how quickly they'd mobilized other family members, how seamlessly they'd shifted from demanding money to questioning my mental health. The hardest part, Dr. Reeves continued, is that some people will believe their version of events. You have to be prepared for that. I was more prepared than she knew. That afternoon, I got a call from my daughter-in-law, Amanda, Michael's wife. Diana, I'm really concerned about you, she said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. Michael told me about your conversation last week, and honestly, you didn't sound like yourself. Amanda had never called me just to chat in the 7 years she'd been married to my son. Every interaction we'd had was either her asking for money or her explaining why Michael needed money. I'm fine, Amanda. Better than I've been in years, actually. But cutting off the family like this, it's so extreme. Michael is devastated. He's been crying every night. The image of my 6'2" son crying nightly over his mother's refusal to pay his bills would have been comical if it weren't so pathetic. Maybe he should consider getting a second job, I suggested. The silence on the other end was telling. Diana, that's cruel. You know how hard Michael works. Actually, I don't. I know how much money he spends, but I've never been clear on how much he earns. Maybe we should have that conversation. I can't believe you're being like this. What would Robert think? Bringing up my dead husband was a new low, even for them. But instead of the guilt I would have felt 6 months ago, I felt anger. Clean, sharp anger that clarified everything. Robert would think his wife deserves better than being treated like an ATM by her own children. I hung up before she could respond. The calls from extended family continued throughout January, each one following the same script. Concerned opening, gentle probing about my mental state, suggestion that I was being too harsh on my loving children, offer to mediate a reconciliation. I started declining the calls, but it wasn't just phone calls. Jessica showed up at my door on a Tuesday afternoon, her eyes red and puffy, holding my youngest grandson. Mom, please, she said when I opened the door. Carter misses his grandma. Look at him. He's been asking for you every day. Carter was 18 months old. He barely spoke, let alone asked for specific people every day. But Jessica was holding him like a shield, using my love for my grandchildren as leverage. Hi, sweetheart, I said to Carter, but I didn't invite them in. How are you? Mom, can we please talk? I'm sorry about everything. I know we made mistakes, but we're family. We can work through this. What mistakes specifically are you sorry for? She blinked, clearly not expecting the question. The whole situation. The miscommunication about Christmas. Miscommunication? The credit card thing. We should have asked first. What else? What do you mean? What other mistakes are you sorry for? The years of treating me like your personal bank? The text messages calling me dramatic and clingy? The fact that you never call unless you need something? Her face crumpled. Mom, that's not fair. We love you. Jessica, when was my birthday last year? She opened her mouth, then closed it. When was the last time you invited me to dinner at your house? She shifted Carter to her other hip, avoiding eye contact. When was the last time you asked how I was doing without it being a preface to asking for money? This isn't fair. You're making me feel like a terrible daughter. I'm not making you feel anything. I'm asking you to look at our relationship honestly. She started crying then, the same tears that had always worked before. I don't understand why you're punishing us. We're your children. We're supposed to be able to count on you, and I'm your mother. I'm supposed to be able to count on you too. You can. We're here for you. Are you? Or are you here because your student loan payment bounced and you need me to fix it? Her face flushed red. Yes, that's a problem, but that's not why I'm here, isn't it? The silence stretched between us until Carter started fussing, picking up on the tension. I can't do this anymore, Jessica. I can't pretend that our relationship is healthy when it's built entirely on what I can provide for you. So, you're choosing to have no relationship with your grandchildren? There it was, the final manipulation, the threat that had kept me in line for years. No, I said quietly, you're choosing that. You're the one who's decided that your mother only has value if she's solving your problems. I kissed Carter's forehead gently. I love you both, but I can't keep destroying myself to make your life easier. I closed the door softly, my heart breaking a little for the grandchildren who would grow up thinking their grandmother had abandoned them. But I couldn't save my grandchildren by sacrificing myself. I couldn't teach them about healthy relationships by modeling an unhealthy one. That night, I called Dr. Reeves' emergency line. I think I'm losing my grandchildren, I said when she called back. You're not losing them, she said gently. You're showing them what self-respect looks like. Someday they might thank you for that, and if they don't, then you'll have saved yourself and that's enough. As I hung up the phone, I realized she was right. For the first time in 6 years, saving myself felt like enough. 2 years later, I was repotting orchids in my sunroom when the doorbell rang. I'd moved to a smaller house across town 6 months after our last confrontation, needing space that didn't hold memories of who I used to be. The new place had better light for my photography hobby, and a garden where I could grow the flowers I'd always wanted but never had time for. Through the window, I could see Michael standing on my front porch, holding what looked like a card. No car in the driveway behind him, which meant someone had dropped him off. Probably Sarah, staying safely out of sight in case this went badly. I almost didn't answer. It had been 8 months since any of them had tried to contact me directly. The extended family had given up their intervention attempts around month 6, when it became clear I wasn't having a breakdown so much as a breakthrough. But something about the way he stood there, shoulders slumped, made me curious enough to open the door. Hi, Mom. He looked older, thinner. There were lines around his eyes that hadn't been there before, and his usually perfect hair was disheveled. Michael, would it be okay if I came in? Just for a few minutes? I studied his face, looking for signs of the manipulation I'd grown so familiar with. But what I saw instead was exhaustion. Genuine exhaustion, not the performative kind he'd used when asking for money. All right, but just for a few minutes. He followed me into the living room, glancing around at the space I'd created for myself. Bookshelves full of photography books. An easel set up near the window where I'd been teaching myself to paint. Photos I'd taken displayed on the walls instead of family portraits that had made me feel guilty. Your house is nice, he said, settling into the chair I offered. Different, thank you. He held out the card he'd been carrying. It's your birthday. I remembered this year. I took it, noting that it was handwritten, not store-bought. Inside, his familiar scrawl. I know I don't deserve forgiveness, but I wanted you to know I'm trying to understand what we did wrong. Happy birthday, Mom. I miss you. Thank you, I said again, meaning it this time. We sat in silence for a moment. He seemed to be working up to something, and I waited. I'd learned patience in the past 2 years. I lost my business, he said finally. I'm sorry to hear that. The thing is, I kept waiting for you to call. When the loan payments started bouncing, when clients started leaving, when Amanda and I had to sell the house, I kept thinking you'd see the bankruptcy filing or hear from someone and call to help. He looked up at me with something I'd never seen in his eyes before. Understanding. But you didn't call. No, I didn't. And that's when I realized something. I'd never actually solved a problem in my adult life without your money. Not one. I felt a flutter of something that might have been hope, but I was careful not to show it. Amanda left me 3 months ago, he continued. Took the kids and moved in with her parents. Said she didn't sign up to be married to someone who couldn't support his family. I'm sorry, Michael. That must be very painful. It is. But the weird thing is, I'm not angry at her. I'm angry at myself, because she was right. I never learned how to be responsible for my own life. He rubbed his face with both hands, and I could see how hard this conversation was for him. I got a job, Mom. A real job. Not another business venture funded by your retirement money. It's just customer service at an insurance company, but it's honest work and it pays enough to rent a small apartment. That's good, Michael. Sarah and Jessica think I'm crazy for coming here. They said you'd made it clear you don't want anything to do with us anymore. But I needed to tell you something. I waited. You were right. About everything. We did use you. We did take you for granted. We did stop seeing you as our mother and started seeing you as as a resource. The words hung between us. It was the admission I'd wanted to hear for 2 years, but now that it was here, I felt more sad than vindicated. I don't know how to fix what we broke, he said. I don't even know if it can be fixed, but I wanted you to know that I finally understand what we cost you. What did we cost me? Your respect for yourself. Your right to be treated like a person instead of a bank account. Your golden years that you should have been enjoying instead of working to support 3 grown adults who should have been supporting themselves. I felt tears prick at the corners of my eyes, but they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of relief. He finally saw it. He finally understood. I'm in therapy now, he continued, trying to figure out how I became someone who could steal from his own mother and then blame her for being hurt about it. Therapy is good. It's helped me a lot. I know I don't have the right to ask for anything from you, and I'm not here to ask for money or forgiveness or another chance. I just wanted you to know that I'm trying to become someone who deserves to be your son. We sat quietly for a few minutes. Outside, I could hear birds in the garden I'd planted, wind chimes I'd hung on the porch where I drank my morning coffee. Would you like some tea? I asked. I'd like that very much. As I made tea in my small kitchen, I felt something shift inside me. Not forgiveness exactly, but the possibility of it. Michael had come here without asking for anything, without expecting anything. He'd come to give me something instead. Acknowledgement, understanding, accountability. How are Sarah and Jessica? I asked when I returned with 2 cups. Struggling. Sarah's husband left her last month, said he was tired of her expecting him to fix all her problems the way you used to. And Jessica, she's working 3 jobs to pay off her student loans and credit card debt. She's angry all the time now. Are they angry at you for coming here? They're angry at everyone except themselves. But that's not your problem anymore, is it? No, it's not. He sipped his tea, looking around my living room again. You seem happy, Mom. Really happy. I don't think I'd seen you really happy in years before everything happened. I am happy. It's taken some getting used to, living for myself instead of everyone else. But yes, I'm happy. Good, you deserve that. We talked for another hour. Not about money or problems or family drama, just about life. My photography classes, his new job, books we'd been reading. It felt strange and wonderful to have a conversation with my son that wasn't centered around what he needed from me. When he stood to leave, he paused at the door. I know this doesn't fix anything, but I'm going to pay you back. The business loan, the credit card charges, all of it. It might take me 10 years, but I'm going to pay you back every penny. Michael, you don't have to. Yes, I do. Not because you're asking for it, but because I need to. I need to prove to myself that I can take responsibility for what I did. After he left, I sat in my garden as the sun set, thinking about the conversation. It had been exactly what I'd hoped for 2 years ago. Genuine remorse, real understanding, a commitment to change. But the surprising thing was that I no longer needed it. The validation was nice, but it didn't change anything fundamental about my life. I'd already found my peace, my purpose, my joy. I'd already learned that I could be whole without their approval or appreciation. Michael's visit was a gift, but it wasn't necessary for my happiness. And that, I realized, was the truest measure of how far I'd come. 3 months later, he sent me a check for $500 with a note, first payment. Thank you for teaching me that love isn't the same thing as enabling. I deposited the check and used it to buy a plane ticket to Portland to visit Linda. I'd learned that the price of dignity was everything I'd thought I couldn't live without. My children's approval, my role as their rescuer, my grandchildren's presence in my daily life. But what I'd gained in return was something I'd never had before, myself. And that trade, painful as it had been, was worth every penny.